Hey everyone, this is Federalism video number 2. And so I did doing this the same day as I did video number 1. We are in early July still. So anyway, where I left off, I just want to make sure you understand the importance of federalism. Like, there is this ongoing debate since the beginning of our country of who should make the decisions, national government or state or local government. And so we're going to transition into talking about it in terms of money a little bit today. So let me go back to this PowerPoint. I starting off here by saying the failure of dual federalism. So the Great Depression, which is still the worst economic collapse ever in our country's history, although after the COVID situation now is second. The stock market crashed in 1929. Unemployment's over 25%, and I think it hit numbers like 15% or so in the situation we're in now. And so thousands of banks failed and weren't really sure how the country should react to the situation. So when the presidents, I'm going to skip a little bit of this here, but when the presidents looked at what they could do, the president at the time was Herbert Hoover. So Herbert Hoover, the presidential elections there, I don't have much listed because Herbert Hoover was a Republican and he believed that the Constitution gave the legislative branch 17 things they could do, and that was it, and they couldn't do anything else. Those Article 1, Section 8, those enumerated powers, that was all they could do. So Herbert Hoover, with a few exceptions, pretty much said, tough it out. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps, work harder, save your money, do what you can. Okay, just try to get by. And America didn't love that. Okay, so and Herbert Hoover was a Republican president who said, look, we can't do anything. The national government doesn't have that power. Now, so before we get to FDR, we're going to talk a lot about money here, and that term right above presidential elections, where it's fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism, fiscal is about money and it's federalism, and so we're talking about money going from one level to another, and it only makes sense it's going to go down. So the national government has a lot more money, and they take money sometimes and give it to the states. So what I'll talk about today and in the next lesson is when the national government's going to give money to the states, who do you trust most making that decision? So do you trust Washington, D.C. to tell you how to spend the money, or do you trust the state or local government to decide what to do with it? Now, so fiscal federalism is that money going back and forth between national and state. So when FDR comes into office, Franklin Roosevelt, and he starts the New Deal during the Great Depression, he decides he's going to basically say, I don't care what the Constitution says, I'm not going to be a strict constructionist, we're going to just start doing all kinds of things. And so he starts this New Deal, and all these programs come about, and a lot of people say he's a communist, and so he started doing all these things, maybe not exactly spelled out in the Constitution. And so some of you, if you've taken A Push or U.S. history, you might know some of the programs like the CCC and the WPA and the PWA and AAA and all these different things. There are all these different programs, alphabet soup of programs, and they gave people jobs and they spent a lot of money, but it was mostly through national government control. Now, when the court packing thing is, FDR was mad because he thought Americans overall liked his programs, and the Supreme Court declared a couple unconstitutional, most notably the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Part of that program was national government paid farmers to destroy their crops and to kill some of their livestock so they could keep the price of goods up. It doesn't make a lot of sense, I know, in a depression, but the court declared some of his programs unconstitutional, so he got mad. He wanted to replace some of he wanted to add justices to the 9 who were on the court just so he could cancel out the vote of the old people on the court. He thought the Supreme Court justices were just old and out of touch, and he wanted to add a judge for everyone who was over 70. So he would be adding a handful of judges, and that way the judges who were old, there'd be a younger judge who could cancel out their vote because younger people were more willing to change. But Americans hated his idea of adding judges. The legislative branch didn't like it. It was very unpopular. But anyway, it shows his frustration that he wanted his programs to get through. What I wanted to mention with the money aspect, though, is FDR starts this new thing. It is around today. It's a grants and aid program. And basically what it was a way that the national government would give money to the states. but it was very, very strict control of the money. So the definition for grants and aid would be money for a specific program. It's going to be similar to the next one we say, but we don't trust the states. The national government's going to give money to the state of North Carolina, and they're going to give it for the Civilian Conservation Corps to build this trail or bridge or something. And that's it. So you want the money, but the national government's telling you exactly what you have to do at the local level. So very strict control of this grants and aid program. Many times the grants and aid money was given based on matching funds, that there was given based on the belief that in order to get that money that you would be getting from the national government, you would have to kick in a certain amount to match. It might not be a 100% matching fund. It might be like a 50% or 25%. But basically, in order for you to say get $1 million to build these bridges or something, you might have to kick in $500,000. That term matching fund, the only reason I want you to think about that in the sense of it's basically a way to get more money to a program that the national government wants money to go to, so they don't have to pay it all. But it also is a way to get the state and local government to show that they care enough about the money they're getting and the program they're getting it for, that they're willing to kick in some of their own money. So matching funds would be, the U.S. government's going to give $1 million to expand RDU Airport, but this area, Wake County, North Carolina, has to also kick in $1 million in order to get that $1 million. And sometimes grants and aid programs are done that way. So grants and aid, the grants and aid program is money for a very specific program. Now, Lyndon Johnson, years later, another Democrat comes in. All right, so we think of the New Deal as being this massive federal program, and it is, but Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, his Great Society was even bigger, more laws and more money spent, and we would think of now as liberal programs. So when Lyndon Johnson's in office, he's going to pump some money towards the grants and aid, but it's going to start this new thing. He's going to have a new type of grant that is very prevalent today, called categorical grants. Now this is going to be a little confusing based on the last one. Grants and aid was money to a specific program. This is money, categorical grants are money to a specific purpose with a minuscule amount of flexibility in there. All right, so it's still national government controlling exactly how the money is spent with just a little bit of wiggle room. All right, so grants and aid would be money for this bridge, this road, that's what it is, there's no leeway. Categorical grant would be, let's say I sometimes use this example of, let's say that grants and aid was money to buy iPads for the K through 12 classroom. You had to buy iPads for grants and aid. That was very specific. There's no flexibility. A categorical grant would say the money is for some kind of device or smart tablet or smart device or something in the classroom. So you could pick the state could pick the brand or the size of it or whatever, but they had to use it in a very specific category, very specific. All right, so Democrats like more national control over the money. In the next lesson, we'll get to what the Republicans do. So categorical grants, Lyndon Johnson, to fight poverty in the United States in his really famous war on poverty, he used large categorical grants to send money to places around America. The part of this war on poverty was the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. Not real important that you necessarily remember that specific law, but understand that this was a way to help fight poverty, this Economic Opportunity Act, especially in the inner cities. So I just wanted to give you two examples of specific programs that were part of that law that are still around today. And they even asked about Head Start in the 2020, some of the versions of the AP test. Head Start is a program that started in the 1960s, again, still around today. My niece, my wife's sister's daughter, went through this. And Head Start is a program that is for poor families, poor mothers who have little kids, and the little kids, it's basically a government-funded preschool because people who have money can afford preschool, and so the thinking is they're getting a head start. So in order to make it so poorer people don't get left behind, they're allowed this government-funded not daycare, I shouldn't say that, preschool. And but the issue was for a lot of Americans, the Head Start facilities were located where people lived. So they're located in inner cities, mostly in cities, not out in Nebraska countryside. So a lot of Americans looked at it like, wait a minute, are the Democrats trying to get the vote of African Americans who lived in the inner cities, who were allowed to vote after, the 1964 Civil Rights Act and then the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And so it seemed like a lot of average sort of poor white Americans were mad that the program they thought wasn't helping them as much, Head Start program. I think for many Americans, it's very difficult to argue that this isn't a good thing just to help poor little kids get started on their schooling, because it is kind of sad to think that many kids when they go to kindergarten are already behind because of the way their parents teach them or because of their lack of opportunity or not going to preschool or whatever. So this is a way to, instead of having some richer kids be here when they enter kindergarten and the poorer kids here, to hopefully put them on a level playing field when they enter kindergarten. Now, Job Corps is, I think, a much more interesting one in a way. It's still around today. Very few Greenhouse kids, if any, have ever heard of Job Corps or ever been near one. Job Corps is part of this law. Again, a very liberal program. But Job Corps is for, I don't want to say at-risk youth because it's not always at risk, but it's people that are, I think the age are like 16 to 21 or 22. I'm not sure the top age. But people who may have gotten in trouble in school, maybe regular traditional school is not for them. Maybe they've been in trouble with the law and they're given this as an option to avoid juvenile detention or something. But a lot of times it's just people who just don't fit in a school system, and they go talk to their counselor and they apply to the Job Corps and they do this. In the Job Corps facilities, there's at least one in every state, but they're usually in more remote areas. There's a Job Corps in Alaska, and I lived right near one in northern Maine, and there's a Job Corps. And so the one in Maine, they would take they would take people from Philadelphia north, so it'd be like New York and Boston and Hartford and New Haven and places in the Northeast, and they would go to middle of nowhere, Maine, and they would be in the Job Corps. And so basically the Job Corps is free job technical training. So it's not like a traditional high school education, but the thinking is if these kids are at risk from dropping out of school, maybe because, entering crime and stuff, that maybe we can, as a government, put money up front, however much it costs for them a year, $15,000 or $20,000 or whatever it costs, tax dollars a year to have one of these people in the Job Corps, so that these people can learn a skill like becoming a mechanic or a cook or a plumber or something. And then they can have a Job Corps certificate, and then they can go make a living after it and pay taxes and be a law-abiding citizen. So the thinking is we're going to invest up front. Now, this would be this would be categorical grants. The money's going to the Job Corps facilities in these areas, and Head Start. They're very specific national government-controlled programs. And so I want you to think of that as we end today. That Democrats generally like the national government control over the money and the programs. Democrats don't generally trust states, often southern states. Democrats don't trust to do what's right. So they want the national government to control things. Maybe it's a bad example, but even my wife is just mad that right now that the national government doesn't come out and say everybody needs to wear a mask in this coronavirus situation. Why we're leaving it up to states or local governments. Like, she tends to favor a lot of more national control. So some of you may favor more state control and local control. So anyway, just think about that. We'll get to the Voting Rights Act in another chapter. So I will stop there, and we'll just have one more day in our federalism unit. Thank you.